This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it in
Stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Free for All Friday, and welcome to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Special edition today. A very special edition today. Coming to you live from Mackinac Island, the location of the Republican Leadership Conference going on, and it should be a big event. Several of the big candidates going to be here, including Carly Fiorina, who by most accounts was the big winner in Wednesday's debate. Also here, Rand Paul, John Kasich, Governor Scott Walker, Senator Ted Cruz, and they're all going to be on site here today, or through the weekend, I should say. Michigan is a big deal because of our March 8th primary coming up in 2016. In years past, Michigan was not nearly as important because, well, our primary came much later in the year. This time around, March 8th is a very important date. Big primaries being held on the 1st of March, and then Super Tuesday coming after March 8th. So Michigan pivotal for some of these candidates. Now, as you look at who came out on top from the Wednesday performance, clearly, Carly Fiorina getting a bump from that performance. Donald Trump, we'll wait and see how his numbers come up. But in talking to Ivy and myself, we thought Marco Rubio did very well. And we met a bunch of people here at the Chippewa at the Pink Pony last night here on the island, talking to several people who had watched the debate. Now, one of the gentlemen said he would never vote for Donald Trump no matter what the situation was and threatened to move to Canada. And I pointed out that he and Michael Moore might have a nice time together. Just saying. And, but telling other people, there were Jeb supporters there, Jeb Bush supporters, and some others. But I found it interesting that most people did agree that Carly came out on top, no question. And that's where the press is going now. Take that backdrop and inject Hillary Clinton, who gave her first live interview of the campaign, the first time she's finally stepped up to get the live interview. Did it with Wolf Blitzer on CNN. And Wolf Blitzer said, Carly Fiorina said, if you want to stump a Democrat, she said, ask them about Hillary Clinton's accomplishments as Secretary of State. If you were on that debate stage with her, what would you say was your number one accomplishment as Secretary of State? At which point Hillary Clinton meandered around, said she didn't see the debate, and that's what Republicans do, and now they need to attack her, and so on and so forth. Finally, after meandering around for a while, she started pushing her book, Hard Choices, the book that nobody read, the book that, well, frankly, bombed. So, anyhow, it's Free for All Friday. So the phone number here is 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966, a very political version of the program as we are here on Mackinac Island. We stayed at the Chippewa last night, had dinner at the Pink Pony, loved it there, by the way. Beautiful ride over. We rode over with Ruth Johnson, Secretary of State for the state of Michigan. Ivy and I did. Of course, they were trading fish pictures back and forth. Ruth, hardcore into fishing and kayaking. She likes to kayak through the Straits of Mackinac while fishing. So the next time you renew your tabs in your car, keep that in mind. Ruth Johnson's serious. So her and Ivy had a nice chat back and forth, trading pictures. Anyhow, it's Free for All Friday. I'm up here, Brother Shane, holding down the mothership in Lansing. Shane, how are you?
Good morning. How's the weather up there?
It's a little rainy this morning. It was perfect yesterday. I'm not kidding. Coming across on Shepler's, which, by the way, Shepler's is the ferry company for the Steve Gruber Show. Loved the ride over. It was fabulous. I mean, we were all sitting up on the top deck. The only breeze, I think, was the breeze being created by the boat, and we're sitting there. Ronald Romney was up there in front of us, and Ruth Johnson was there with us, and we had a nice chat. And the weather this morning, though, a little bit rainy, and I guess it's supposed to hang out until mid-afternoon. But, typical fall.
How long you staying on the island? You coming off today?
Yeah, we're coming off later, but we're sending up another member of the team, a new member of the team, actually. Katie Hyde will be up here. She's going to meet with as many of these candidates as she can, and she's going to bring us a full report on Monday on the Steve Gruber Show. So Katie's going to be up here. Unfortunately, believe it or not, I had some more pressing issues this weekend, and would I like to stay, I would, but it just didn't work out for me this weekend, and just the way it is. You understand.
Well, and the living arrangements are a little tough up there. You're going to put poor Katie in a tent in the state park?
Well, you can't put a tent in the state park, can you? There's no camping here, I don't think.
I don't know. I have never.
81% of the island is state land, but there is no campground on Mackinac Island. Trust me, I checked. I did. No, she's going back across on the ferry over to Mackinac City or whatever for a hotel. But the place is packed because it's not just this. There's 4 weddings. I mean, you've seen the board when you get to the ferry on Mackinac Island. We've got the Republican Leadership Conference going on. You've got some other big events going on. You've got 4 weddings this weekend going on the island. Trust me, the place is packed. Yeah, but which is good for business, right?
Right. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. And that's good business up there. Republicans, good tippers.
Yeah, they're all bringing in the cash, and I'm really looking forward to see how Scott Walker reacts, because to me in that debate, Scott Walker was the one that needed to make the most noise and made, well, very little, frankly. And I think that his campaign it's in trouble, frankly. And so he had originally canceled this visit to Michigan. Scott Walker had. He was going to go to Iowa and New Hampshire. And he then changed his mind, decided to come back here. And I wonder what his message is going to be here. I mean, he had some fiery comments and stayed on point, but not enough attention. You and I were talking before the show. The candidate got the most time during the debate was like 17 minutes. The least time, 7 minutes, which is probably somebody like Governor Huckabee, whose campaign is also, right on the edge of being irrelevant.
Well, and he just recently, a few weeks ago, he was number 4 or 5, but he has dropped also.
Yeah, he's dropped. Rand Paul is barely hanging on. I believe he's going to be here this weekend. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. I mean, but here's where it got silly. Donald Trump came out first thing saying Rand Paul shouldn't even be here. He's at 1%. Why is he here? Okay, so you pick this fight over nothing and for no reason, and why?
Yeah, he's looking for a fight.
If he's at 1%, what difference does it make?
He wants to be confrontational, and he's putting it right out there. He's not even wasting any time to be confrontational. And once he saw that was getting him a lot of attention, I think he's doing it more than he was before.
There may be some truth to that. Being braggadocious, the word he's using all the time. I'm not saying this to be braggadocious. Well, sure you are.
Yes, you are. But
sure you are.
It just, I think it's very interesting that the 2 leading candidates right now, or the 3 leading candidates really, are non-politicians. What do you think
That's
of
right.
that?
Okay, we'll get back to that in just a moment. It's Free for All Friday. The other big stories, Cindy Gambrit has thrown her hat in the race to run for the seat she was just thrown out of last week, for real. And Todd Corser, how did he spend his time after resigning from the state house? Well, apparently waiting for a special order at Burger King. We'll talk about it.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
And the colors of the sea find your eyes with trembling.
All right, welcome back to it. It's Free for All Friday. Some things are so dumb, you can't even make them up. And I rarely give MLive credit, but Rob Burkhart pointed something out to me here on the ride over, on the horse-drawn carriage taxi ride over. Cindy Gambrit has announced that she is going to run for the seat she was just thrown out of. And then, no joke. She jumped in the race yesterday of the seat she was just thrown out of for the sexual affair, the sordid affair with Todd Corser, who resigned, and then she was thrown out, and what a mess. And anyhow, so I lost my looking at something else there for a second. So Cindy Garrett's jumping back in the race. You can't make that up, first of all, which is unbelievable. And then we learned yesterday that Todd Corser, in this sordid affair, was who resigned at 3:12 in the morning a week ago today, went and sat in a Burger King parking lot along Lake Lansing Road in East Lansing for 13 hours. Well, what's he doing there? It made me think of a song, Shane. You ready?
Yes.
Hold the pickle, hold the lettuce, sexual deviants don't upset us. Oh, you with me? Burger King.
Did you just
Have
sing
her
that on the
your
radio?
way. Have her your way. Todd Corser, what a mess. Cindy Garrett, what a mess. Yeah, there it is. I sang on the radio. Let's go to the hotline. Steve is on the line this morning in Lansing checking in. Steve, how are you?
Well, thank you. It's been just 5 short months since the governor and the legislative body got their hind end handed to them over the referendum for the roads. That didn't really amount to anything related to the roads. And you're talking about, you're doing exactly what they want you to do. They want you to ignore the roads and how MDOT should be running it, and how if the money being taxed for gasoline goes to anything but the roads, they need to change it. As I drove north on 75 and back when I walked the bridge this year, once again, the roads were not exactly stellar, but why would the governor care? He usually bombs around on a helicopter anyhow. Usually. I believe we are being played just like circus monkeys. I'm sorry. That's the way I feel. And this bunch of losers that y'all are going to consider putting back in office are the very ones that have failed us again.
What is your answer?
First of all, like I said, you de-tax, you anything that's not road-related that's coming out of the funding of of gas tax, needs to be eliminated and find another source of funding. And then you hand it over to MDOT and let MDOT make the calls.
All right, fair enough. But there is
an entity, and they'll figure out how many pennies per gallon that we need to add to the wholesale end of it, or however the financing works. But MDOT needs to run it because clearly this legislative body is unable.
Fair enough, Steve-O. Thank you for checking in. It's Free-for-All Friday, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. You can dial in your thoughts, whether it's on the Republicans gathering here on Mackinac Island, whether it's road repairs or the lack thereof. Cindy Garrett, Todd Corser. I told you when we interviewed him last week, he would not rule out the possibility of running again. His checkered political past, this mess, and Cindy Garrett. MLive, as I started to say earlier, MLive did an editorial. All it said was no with an exclamation point. All it said was no with an exclamation point. That was it. And I think, come on, Shane, I think that might cover it.
Well, sorry, I was distracted for just a moment.
That's all right. But, for her to jump back in the race is an insult to her.
Well,
her constituents in the 80th, I believe.
Well, no. She said leave it up to the voters. This gives the voters the actual chance to say whether they want her in there or not. And she will get, their say in the matter. Now,
well, there is that. I'll give you that. The voters can throw her out now.
Now, okay, she had an affair with Mr. Corser, but she was not part of the cover-up, the very strange cover-up that he attempted. She had no part of that, and that was proven. So
that's true, but my understanding, that's not why they were removed.
Her having an affair may or may not interfere with her ability to do her job in the legislature. So
maybe, but my problem with it continues to be the same. These are both of those folks were ones that ran on being, conservative, family values, Christians, and it was a load of bunk. Well, and not that other people haven't had affairs and other people haven't been hypocrites and so forth
on both sides of the aisle, but she was here. She is. She's going to give the voters the opportunity to say no. you ran on this. This is not what we voted you in on, and we do not want you back. And they can share a clear message on how they stand on it. And I think that's what's going to happen, because there's going to be some other people jumping that race. I don't know who has yet, but I'm pretty sure she's going to find out that she's not welcome back based on her actions.
No, there are several people that have announced for both seats, both in the 80 and 82nd State House districts. A host of candidates in both. But believe it or not, it might be, the fact that there are a bunch of candidates in there. It might be that there are, a bunch of candidates in there that give her the opportunity to get the inside track, because if you split the vote up small enough, right, she might have enough core supporters to sneak through again. We'll see. But it's a big opportunity for the Democrats, too, if she does end up on the ballot for that special election.
But that's a very conservative district. They may have a chance, but I think that if she gets the nomination, she would then have a chance to get voted back in.
All right. Sit tight right there. It's Free for All Friday. You can chime in like Steve did on the roads. Anything that's on your mind, bring it to our attention. We'll talk about it. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966 live from the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island for the Republican Leadership Conference. I am Steve Gruber. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
All right, welcome back to the program. Live from Mackinac Island's Grand Hotel. We're in the art gallery, by the way. If you guys are in the, if you're in the neighborhood, stop by, say hi. We're kind of hard to miss. Did we put that picture up on Facebook yet? Ivy's going to put up a picture of the whole setup here. The new mobile studio, if you will. Put it up on Facebook at the Steve Gruber Show. Check that out. The program brought to you today, this special edition, by Health Partners of Michigan and the Eisenhower Center. Advocates for preserving auto no-fault here in the state of Michigan. I asked you before the break how many Republican candidates there are for president. You probably said too many, but the question is, how do you become a legitimate candidate? You've got the debates this week, for example. 11 people on the upper card, 4 on the undercard. But one man that's recognized by the Republican National Committee, I've gone to the website and looked at this and verified this, is not being invited to any of these events, not since he joined the race, the former Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, and a declared Republican candidate seeking the 2016 GOP presidential nomination. At this point, you'd think people would have heard of Mark Everson, but most have not. But he is here on the program with us today. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and I've been right to where you're broadcasting from. Lovely place.
It is a lovely place, yeah, and there's going to be some of your colleagues or competitors here. But, the last time, this is the second time you've been with us. The last time you were here, you were filing suit against those who are preventing you from even getting the opportunity to join a debate. I mean, let's be honest. George Pataki has like 3 supporters, and they're all relatives, right? So, I mean, well, I'm not.
Well, what you're speaking to, Steve, is this is a closed shop where the big media boys, they think they're going to call the shots in this election. And I'm in Iowa and New Hampshire campaigning on a retail basis. I've got to tell you, I don't think all the voters agree. They're sort of a little bit upset that the big donors on Wall Street and the media are taking away what is traditionally the role of the folks in Iowa and New Hampshire to surface talent and thin the field. But that is really what's happening here.
So they're basically out there promoting the horses that they like, or maybe not even horses they like, but you're talking about Wall Street. For example, a lot of people, including Donald Trump back when he was on the other side of the line, financed Democrats a lot. It's not necessarily that they like these folks, but they think they can make a lot of money if certain folks are in office, so that's the path they pursue.
Well, that's what Trump's point was that you don't just throw that money towards somebody, you expect something in return. And here's a bit about the media. Look, I was getting a haircut yesterday, and 2 people were talking, the 2 barbers were talking, and one said to the other, "Did you see the debate last night?" And she said yes, and he said, "Who do you think won?" And she just said CNN won.
No, that's true. They had more than 20 million viewers. In fact, it was the highest rated event in the history of Chicken Noodle News. I mean, CNN.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, what does this come to? This is not the Lincoln Douglas debates where we are writing history in a positive way of our democracy.
So, how do you finally break through? I mean, can you? I mean, what happens? Do you have to keep shaking hands in Iowa until you show up in the polls and they can't ignore you anymore, or how does that work?
What we're doing now is we're going to spend increasing amounts of time in New Hampshire. I'll be in New Hampshire. I was there over the weekend, and I'll be there again this afternoon. And what we're doing is spending the time there. And what the hope is that we'll break through there, and then people will say, "Geez, how's this guy? How is he starting to poll in New Hampshire, just in New Hampshire, 7th or 8th, ahead of some of these career politicians?" That's what has to happen. And then if that happens, you'll get the media to take a look at you nationally. But why I'm doing this also is important. I mean, I have extensive private sector experience. I've run factories. I've lived and worked overseas in Turkey, France, and Asia, so I know what it is to compete. But I have the unrivaled executive branch experience. 6 years under Reagan, 6 years under second President Bush. I was in the situation when President Reagan, when he was talking about the deployment of nuclear missiles in Western Europe, when we were, eyeball to eyeball with the Soviet Union. So I've seen it quite a bit here, yet I'm not a politician, so I'm not in the pocket of people. So I believe if I hang in there long enough, what will happen is people will say, this is someone who speaks to this thirst for outsiders, but actually knows something about government. That's a positive trait that we'd like somebody to have, because these are complex problems.
Well, I've talked to you before, and I'll be honest with you, Mark, I was fairly astonished at how well spoken you were and how articulate you were about the issues, and you had a very good grasp on pretty much everything we talked about last time. So I went and did some research, and to me, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you are the former commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. That in of itself should be a big enough nameplate for people to go, hey, the former IRS commissioner is running. Maybe we should take a look at his credentials, see where he fits in.
Here's the thing, Steve. I ran the immigration system under Reagan. I was the number 2 there. Oversaw all issues, operations rather. And then before I went over to the IRS, I was the management deputy at OMB. I helped set up the Homeland Security Department. You tell me, if there are 3 bigger issues in taxes, immigration, and Homeland Security, I'd like to know what they are in this election. But
and really there aren't. So let me ask you this, and we're going to keep you for a couple of segments here this morning, because I think that you're a fascinating conversation, no matter where your campaign goes. I think you have a lot to offer as far as insight, because you have been there, Situation Room and everywhere else. But let me ask you the question that gets asked of all the candidates. What about Donald Trump? What about these outsiders? I mean, is Donald Trump a legitimate candidate in your estimation or not?
Well, a couple points here. First, Carson, Fiorina, Trump, they all speak to this desire, which I felt I identified before I made the decision to run, that we want a non-traditional candidate here. And beyond that, he speaks directly to the anger of many people who feel that they feel more deeply than the country is off track. They're just angry. So that is all legitimate. And he has a business record, yes. But where I draw the line and feel that what he's doing is wrong is he is inciting divisions in the country intentionally in order to help his campaign. And that's going to get us nowhere, neither as a country nor really as a party. We can't win with 25 or 30% of the people who are angry in the Republican Party. We need to have somebody who will unite us. And on the immigration issue, as an example, Steve, I mean, I look at this very simply. We need to secure the border. I know how to do that. I was at the INS. We need to put in E-Verify, which means that when an employer goes to hire somebody, if they're checking my documents, they've also got to check with the government to make sure that I'm who I say I am, that there isn't a Mark Everson out in San Diego who's the real Mark Everson. Once you do those things, and you choke off future illegal immigration because you don't have the jobs for people, then you're left with this question, what do you do with the folks who are still here? Criminal aliens, get rid of them, absolutely. Those who violated laws other than the immigration statutes. But the others, I do say, we should have a path to citizenship. As I mentioned, I've lived in France. They have no
Mark, hold that thought.
We need
hold
to get
that thought,
back
Mark.
to that.
We're going to get back in just a second. Mark Everson here on the program. Hold that thought, Mark. I know you're fired up a little bit. It's Free for All Friday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll have more with Mark Everson, a presidential candidate you've probably not heard of, former director of the IRS, and much more. Straight ahead on the Steve Gruber Show.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
Slow down, you move too fast.
Free for All Friday, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Well, we're on the line with the secret candidate, being kept secret from you by the press or by whomever. Mark Everson, former commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. I worked for two presidents, President Reagan and George W. Bush. You know, and you sat down, Mark, you did with the Des Moines Register, and they said something here that I thought was interesting. Everson almost certainly will not rise to the top, but his ideas deserve a chance to be heard, and all Iowans deserve more of a chance to hear him, which I think says a lot. And here's something else I want to share with the listeners. When you talk about people that have accomplished things, first of all, you have a bachelor's degree in history from Yale and a master's degree in accounting from New York University. God, wouldn't that help in the federal government?
I couldn't agree with you more. On the Republican side now, we've got several of the major contenders who put forth tax plans, Steve, and they are a couple $1 trillion short in terms of the revenue they generate. That's not right. That's like if you've got a family and it's spending too much money, and instead of getting the spending under control, the wage earner comes home and says, hey, I've got great news, guys. I've got a new job, and I'm going to earn a lot less. That doesn't work. What we need to do is have a tax plan like the one I've got that will reform taxes and help revenues grow, but bring in what we're getting now and then control the spending so that we get these entitlement programs under control. Otherwise, they're going to bankrupt our future. Let me just say one more quick thing on the immigration, if you will, that we were talking about.
Yeah, because I want to get back to that anyway. So let's continue with your discussion on that. And I mean, it's not an easy solution. You don't suddenly get a bunch of school buses and run them back to the border. I mean, there has to be some common sense applied.
You are 100% right. Look, I ran the system. Mass deportations would just break our legal system and our way of doing law and order in this country down to a very crass and dangerous level. It would disrupt our communities, and it would hurt our economy. That having been said, I mean, we need to, if we're going to confront radical Islam, I think we need to get back to that tradition, that melting pot. What does it say on our quarters? It says, in God we trust on one side, and e pluribus unum on the other, from many one. And that's the only thing that's going to guarantee our realization of our shared destiny, really, if you ask me, and frankly enable us to confront the challenges we've got. So going back to Trump, I think what Trump has done is that same thing the president's done. They've made true immigration reform harder. The president should never have given that executive order. I say I will execute the laws as written, not as I might wish them to be. I've actually been in the executive branch. I know the presidency has great powers, but they're also limited under our Constitution. So that's really a principal reason that I am running, to restore proper constitutional governance to our executive branch.
And I agree with you 100%. So let me ask you something else that's hit the headlines here recently, and something you can't miss, which is the Syrian refugees and the crisis in Europe. Now the president says he wants to bring at least 10,000 of the Syrian refugees to America, and maybe as many as 100,000 over the next handful of years. What's your first reaction to that?
Well, I do think we need to bring in some of the Syrians. We bear responsibility for this. Just as after the Vietnam War, we brought in hundreds of thousands of refugees. Each year we were bringing in, I oversaw that program, the INS piece of that program, and we were still doing it in the 80s when I was at the INS. Now, the problem here is that we bear responsibility for these 4 million people. The president drew a red line.
See, my problem with that is this.
And then he and just stood by and did nothing that gave rise to this chaos. So I think we need to screen these people very carefully, but we should do our part. But there's no way with 4 million people overseas that this is going to be solved through a refugee program. It's got to be solved through, and it's very late in the game, it's got to be solved through more concrete action to deal with the problem itself.
And the difference being the Vietnamese weren't coming here with an attempt to, strap bombs to their bodies and blow us up. I mean, there is that.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I say you've got to screen them carefully. But that was always the case, Steve. Refugees, people were concerned about communism and other issues, and it was very complicated situations. You're right. I mean, the homegrown terrorism is a little bit different, but I think.
All right, let's stop. I want to hit something before we run out of time here. And you're right. Communism was a concern, and then it wasn't a concern for 20 years. And today, it's a concern again because of Vladimir Putin and the weakness of this government's foreign policy and so on and so forth. This is an area you've dwelled in. We've got a minute or two here. Let's talk about how you would approach the Russians and the Crimea and Ukraine and the things that are going on in Eastern Europe today.
Sure, I would have armed those folks when they asked for assistance in the Ukraine. What we need to do is we need to make it as uncomfortable for Putin as possible anytime he's trying to expand. We need to change our foreign policy back to what it was before this president came along, which was a careful analysis of our interests, but work with our allies. At every turn, the president has been true to his stated desire, which is to engage with our adversaries, but it's been done at the expense of our alliances, and that's given Putin a free hand.
Yeah, so it's a weakness. So I hear, and I'd hate to do this to you, but I hear a lot of things that you're saying echo a lot of things that Marco Rubio is saying. You guys seem to be reading from the same script when it comes to some of these issues.
I think we do largely agree. The contrast I would make is, again, I think he doesn't have the executive branch experience or, frankly, the private sector experience, which is helpful. That's what I'm offering. And I think that if you're going to run the government, which interacts so much with industry, you should have had private sector experience as well. So he's an immensely talented individual, particularly on the foreign affairs side. I just think I know I wouldn't be making this race unless I had both the executive branch experience and, frankly, that private sector experience, so that you have the proper perspective.
Well, Mark, I greatly appreciate it coming back on the program, and I'm sure we'll have you back in. I think you're fascinating, and I agree with the Des Moines Register in that people may not know your name, but you've got great ideas, and there's a better chance to you need a chance to talk about them a little bit. Mark Everson, everybody, a candidate for president that you probably haven't heard of until just now. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
It's 55 after the hour. Live from Mackinac Island, a special edition of Free for All Friday here on the Steve Gruber Show, brought to you in part by Health Partners of Michigan and the Eisenhower Center, advocates for preserving auto no fault in Michigan. We got a breaking story from the Marco Rubio campaign coming up in just about 5 minutes. It's more like Sturgis, South Dakota out here, apparently, than Mackinac. I'm not kidding you. It involves the state police, a manhunt, and somebody getting punched. We'll get to that. And I'm being serious now. I got Kyle Malin coming up in a moment. But first, Shane, what did you think about Mark Everson there, the guy that's nobody's heard of? And I just think he's very well-spoken and on top of things.
Well, the guy's got a master's degree. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy, but I don't think we covered enough. He said he was in the IRS, but he mentioned something about the INS, too. And which leads me to believe he knows more about immigration than what we talked to him about.
We heard right there. Well, it's true. Well, he worked 6 years in the Justice Department and so forth in the Reagan administration and in the INS under the Reagan administration. He worked as the commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service for George W. Bush. He worked for Governor Mike Pence in the state of Indiana, doing all sorts of things financially for the state of Indiana that all turned out to be very successful. I mean, this is a guy who's got a great resume, like I said, Yale and New York University, where he has a master's degree in accounting. I mean, how do you you can't put a price on that, right?
Well, no.
I mean, that's what we need in Washington.
He's a very intelligent, very well-spoken, unrecognized candidate. So that's the problem. I mean, Trump's getting so much publicity, so much exposure because of his controversial remarks that everybody else is kind of overlooked, even though we've got Carly and Carson coming up. But no, I like him. I like him a lot. I would consider him in a smaller field. The field's so broad, it's hard to get exposure.
Yeah. All right, well, there you have it. It was Mark Everson, and we're here on the Mackinac Island for the Republican Leadership Conference. A lot of the big names coming in. We have breaking news, as I'm going to tell you here again, breaking news from the Marco Rubio campaign, and potentially not good news for Marco Rubio. We'll see how he handles it. Coming up straight ahead right here on the Steve Gruber Show.